Welcome to Mission Money Fundraising Podcast. I'm your host, Tayloe Clements, and today we have a special guest, Andrew Olsen, Executive Vice President at Dickerson Bakker, as well as the founder of Your Leader Journey. He has raised over $1 billion in funds, and there's just so much I know you're going to learn from him today. Let's just jump right in. Andrew, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Taylor, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. I just know you have so much to share with this audience. And, just to start, just tell me a little bit about your experience in fundraising. How long have you been doing it? And what does life look like now?
Yeah, I've been doing it probably almost as long as some of your listeners have been alive, unfortunately. I've been doing this for 25 years. I kind of stumbled into it, back when I started, there were no college tracks for nonprofit, advancement or anything like that. So I stumbled into it right after college, and I've worked both on the agency side for a lot of years, but also inside organizations. I led development at a children's hospital for a couple of years as well. And so today I lead two sides of the business at Dickerson Bakker. I oversee the direct marketing agency that we run, as well as sort of the major gift and capital campaign communication strategy team. We work with all sorts of ministries and other kinds of nonprofits.
Amazing. I know. I've just loved seeing your work and kind of what you post. You're really big on LinkedIn, as well as your podcast. So I've already learned a lot from you, and I'm excited for the audience listening today to learn from you as well. One thing I wanted to tackle first is you have a lot of experience with overall holistic fundraising as you kind of consult these nonprofits. And something that we're trying to do at Mission Money Fundraising is to help people learn how to digitally fundraise and to make that easier and more approachable. Something that I know that you're passionate about is blending digital and in-person, right? Because they go hand in hand, but sometimes it's hard to see that. Give me kind of your thoughts on how digital and in-person fundraising can work as a strategy for nonprofits.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And kind of the way that I would frame it is any sort of mass media channel, whether that's email or paid ads or social, anything like that, the goal really should never be to do that in a silo, right? So I always think about it as it's the avenue through which you engage someone for a first time and how you build to a point in a relationship where they finally say, you know what? I'm open to taking a phone call, or I'm open to sitting down with you, or yes, I'll come to your event, right? So a lot of organizations raise a lot of money by doing mass marketing. So whether it's digital or print or some other channel, and they stop there. What we see is that's where they stop is still in that transactional realm where they're not getting for lack of a better term, the best gift that they might get from a supporter. Whereas those organizations that use, say, digital as a tool to bridge from not knowing someone to beginning to know them, ultimately to getting to a point where you can be in front of them in person, they're the organizations that can start to create transformational engagement with their supporters and secure those, 5, 6, 7, 8-figure gifts. But you can't do it if you're only looking at the sort of the mass market transactional side. And I think the best opportunities, first and foremost, are the ones where you use the channel in the most human way possible. Yep. The fact that you can send thousands of emails in seconds, or that you can put out an ad campaign that reaches 1 million people, depending on the spend, that's great. But if I'm not talking to you like you're a human being, like we're sitting across the table from one another, then it's going to feel like marketing, and it's going to feel inauthentic, and people aren't going to engage with it at the same level. So I think the most important part is be human, and then let the tools do the work for you to get you to the point where you have the opportunity to actually bridge that gap and build a relationship.
Wow, that's so true. I mean, there's an actual person on the other side, right? And when something I teach people is like, hey, we need to stop focusing on us and focusing on them, focusing on the donor, the people in front of us, the impact we're making. Not only does that give away, help reduce fear, but then that's felt from the other side, even in digital, when we start treating those people like a person,
Absolutely. I think the other thing is do everything you can to reduce friction. I see every day, and I'm sure you do too, organizations that spend a ton of effort and time and money to drive people, say, to their website, and then they don't pay any attention to the experience someone has on the site. So you've just spent hours and thousands of dollars, and you're shocked that 98% of people abandon your site or your page within a few seconds, right? But at the same time, those are the same organizations that say things to me like, well, we don't want to take the time or the effort to change this on our site, or it's really easy for finance that we're using this particular payment platform, and so we don't want to mess that up, so we're not going to do anything to improve the donor experience. And I can't stress enough, but like that's just like holding a stack of cash and lighting it on fire. Like there's no reason an organization should do that. And it's so easy today to build an elegant experience for your users, but you have to prioritize user experience above things like, does my finance system talk to my platform, or those sort of things. Those are important, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the money, it doesn't matter how much or how little finance can count.
So accurate. Even at these, bigger organizations, I look at some of the pages and I go, I don't even know what I'm here for. I don't know what I'm looking at. And if I don't know what I'm supposed to do, even as the marketer, the person creating that page or that experience, how am I supposed to expect donors and the people landing on this page to know what to do?
Yeah.
You help consult a lot of professionals, marketers, nonprofits. What are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing out there right now? And what is like the first thing you're advising when you go into these rooms?
Yeah, there's a couple of sort of macro level things happening in the marketplace. First, over the last 50 years, middle-class Americans have lost 47% of their wealth. And why that's important to people like us and the organizations we serve is that middle-class Americans also make up the bulk of charitable donors. And so if the bulk of charitable donors have lost almost half of their aggregate wealth in the last half century, it means that there are fewer people who are likely to give, and those who are giving are likely to feel it more, right? Feel kind of cash strapped. At the same time, lower income Americans, like nothing has really changed for them. The upper income, the most wealthy, have seen skyrocketing income. And so if organizations aren't rethinking their strategy to engage high net worth Americans really effectively, you're essentially chasing after a diminishing pool of donors who are really feeling the financial stresses. So my first counsel to organizations is make sure you prioritize investing where the greatest level of return is going to be. And today it's in mid-level and major donor audiences. There's a lot of opportunity at the lower level in like a monthly sustainer programs, but those are long tail, meaning what you invest today, you're not going to make back today, right? It's going to take you a couple of years to do that. Whereas if you focus on high net worth individuals, you can actually see really meaningful return very quickly. Right? That's the first one. The second is, I don't know if you saw this last year or not, but I forget who did the study, but what it showed was that for the first time in like 20 or 30 years, percentage of Americans who said they no longer trust nonprofits at the same level has significantly increased. So we also have that pressure, right? And for me, when I hear that, I think, okay, that means we need to do better storytelling. That means we need to be more transparent in sharing what's working well and what's working not so well in our organizations. And we need to do more to build relationship. The third thing is a really interesting phenomena. As younger generations of Americans become charitable, right? They finally have enough assets. Right. They finally feel like they're not like drowning in student debt, that kind of thing. And they start to give. What we're seeing is that those younger generations of donors, they want the same experience with their giving as high net worth donors. So you have these people who give 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, million, and they have certain expectations. The expectations of Gen Z and millennials that are donors are the exact same. They want more access to leadership. They want more connection to the cause. They want more transparency. I mean, all the same things, right? Now, here's why this is a challenge for organizations, because they're staffed and they're structured to handle maybe a couple of hundred high net worth donors who are giving a lot of money, and they can give that kind of personalized experience to. They're not staffed to do the same thing with thousands of donors. And so this is where one of the things that we talk a lot about is the idea of providing an experience to every donor that mimics what a major donor gets. So we call it treating every donor like a major donor. How do you do that? You do that primarily through data and through digital, because you can marry those things at a much less expensive way and drive meaningful engagement and conversation with people, create two-way feedback loops like surveys and question and answer type environments, those sort of things that you can't do in print or at a gala or at a golf tournament with thousands of people, right? But it's what the market is expecting, and I think it's only going to become more pronounced.
Yeah, that's so important. I've saw a stat out there about we're about to see the largest generational transfer of wealth we've seen in decades, and we have to be prepared.
Maybe ever, yeah.
Yeah, ever. And we have to be prepared for those younger donors. And I think that's so key in what I'm trying to do in digital fundraising. Making it easy is it's not an option anymore. We have to be online. We have to have really easy digital experiences that are actually personalized, because that's what the next generation is going to expect. So we need to get ahead of the curve, right?
It really is. I mean, so a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, and I was talking with, I don't know if you know the folks at Money for Ministry. They do legacy gifts and bequests and things like that for ministry organizations. And one of the things that I was sharing with them is I don't think the generational transfer of wealth matters. I think that we have to transfer generational trust.
Yeah.
Because the organizations that are getting significant gifts right now from families, people who've been giving for years, they got there through building trust-based relationships.
Right.
We don't have that with the next generation in those families for the most part, right? One-offs, I'm sure they do, right? But I think if you polled, organizations across the country, they'd say, no, we don't have those same connections. We haven't built that relationship. If we don't transfer the trust first, the money's not going to matter because it's not going to flow anywhere, right? So I think that's where we have to really focus in. And then you're absolutely right. Like, if we can't create giving experiences that mimic your Amazon purchase experience or the experience you have in your favorite apps, where they know you, they understand your buying behavior, your search behavior, those kind of things, and they deliver up experiences that align with that, we're going to lose.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And storytelling is really a good way to do that now. No matter what the generation is, storytelling is a great way to build trust. What's a recent example of a success you've had within fundraising around a time where you've told the story well of an organization?
Yeah, we're in the middle of one right now with a large public policy organization, and they've kind of had, I don't want to say a set it and forget it, but a very sort of rote fundraising program that they just, like, you put money into it and you do more of these activities and those activities and they just work, right? We sat with them and said, well, what if we could make it work better, right? And what if by creating a really compelling offer and a call to action that your supporters haven't seen before and telling some great stories of impact, not just what's happened before, but what's possible if they step up and give more, and then doing it in really unique and engaging ways, like, what do you think we could achieve, right? And so we built this campaign with our partner, and we had no data to go on to say this is what it's going to do. So we just made some assumptions, and we projected that at a stretch we could maybe do $500,000 by doing this, right? And instead we're at 1.3 million, and we've got 2 months to go. And we're getting responses back from supporters like, this is what I've always wanted, right? This is what I'll invest more in. And so that tells me, like, the storytelling is working, right? And the narratives that we've put out there and the way that we're engaging is really moving the needle. I have another organization, a ministry that we partner with, that we sat down with them, and for years they had done very transactional fundraising, whereas, sign this hard and send it back and we'll send it to somebody, things like that, right? And we said, well, wait a minute, you've got some great stories from the field. Tell us about a story that inspires you that you haven't told yet to your supporters. And so they told us a story about how they're working in this one closed country, meaning people there are effectively kept from being able to access scripture and worship and things like that. And so we were able to tell the story of how they work to smuggle information in and disseminate it through some really unique ways. And we wrapped all of that around some creative strategy and storytelling that kind of talked about, getting behind the lines. And it was very like Mission Impossible kind of spy-ish, right?
Yeah.
And we weren't sure what was going to happen. There was concern that some of their supporters might say, like, we don't understand this, or why are you doing this? But we saw great responses. Partners raised their hands and said, we've been waiting for you guys to start talking about these things. This is what we want to fund. This is what's important to us. You need to do more of this. And that campaign outraised the expectation as well. And it was the first one in a good many months that had delivered the kind of results that it did. So those are two very recent examples of, kind of turning what's always been done on its head and just saying, what if we did it differently?
So great. I mean, telling the story of the impact and the work being done and being really transparent about it. People love transparency and authenticity and vulnerability. I think it's really hard for some organizations to go, okay, how do we be vulnerable and authentic and show our personality online as a brand or as, attached to a nonprofit? So I love that. What are some practical lessons from those wins that this audience can apply to digital fundraising?
Yeah. So the first I would say is be bold. It's really easy in this industry to say, here's the 37 things that could go wrong. And sometimes something will go wrong, right? And we're just going to have to deal with it. But the opportunity that is lost by not being bold is massive. Personally, I feel like I am doing this work because I'm called to do it. What I often try to challenge people with is, if you feel like your comfort is more important than your mission, you're probably doing the wrong work, right?
Well said. Well said.
So that would be the first thing, right? Then I would say spend more time with frontline staff than you normally do, because you will get so much additional information and so many rich stories by just sitting with the people who actually oversee the work and who do it every day. Like, there's people like us sit in rooms all day trying to conjure up stories, and the people outside on the front lines, they're actually living it, right? So the more that you can bring marketing and development and program together, the better. And then I would say, like, when you have a great story, there's often what I see is people go, well, is it the right time? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? I think that moving fast is really important. And, the faster you can get in market with a great story, the better. And there may not ever be a time where it feels perfect, but just getting it in the market and letting the market tell you whether or not it resonates is really important. You can go back and tweak it and try it again several months after or a year after or whatever. Obviously not like one right after the other if it's the same story. The more market data you can get and the more that you can hear and see what actual givers and supporters are responding to, the more informed you can be moving forward. And then I think the last one I would say, I get a lot of organizations that create a piece of content, use it once, and then struggle to find the next piece of content. If you've got a great story, you can probably cut that story into 15 or 20 different engagements through social and email and print and e-news and video. I mean, there's so many ways to use content well. I feel like a lot of organizations get overwhelmed because they're trying to create 100 unique pieces of content every year, when if they had 5 to 7 great stories that they could cut up over time, that probably serves their purposes.
Yeah, that's so true. I know that that's a big problem with a lot of organizations working in large nonprofits. I've just seen resources be a fear point, right? And they kind of look at the money, the finances, everything they have to do, all the opportunities. And I think in digital marketing, it's hard to know where to start. How do you advise these organizations as they're looking to tell their story, as they're looking to start to approach digital fundraising from a new angle or to really dive into it? How do you advise them on really utilizing the funds that they have? I know that donors entrust them, right? It's a big pressure to use those dollars well. What are some of the things and advice you give them when they're looking to say, hey, do we hire a videographer to capture this content? Do we need a new digital marketer? I loved what you said about bulk capturing. That's exactly what I advise too. Capture those 5 stories, utilize them, break them up, put them on multiple channels. That's definitely one way to do it. How else do you tackle that?
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts on that. First is there's often this like desire to go and get things for free, right? Because, oh, it's free, we can spend our money elsewhere. Free is often the most expensive investment you make, right? Because it's never truly free. And oftentimes what you get for free has to be redone late and quick. So you end up paying like rush charges and all sorts of expenses. And it's never exactly what you want, right? So
Yeah.
we have to be wise about how we use our dollars, but we also have to be wise about how we don't use them, right? So that's one. The other is I'm a big fan of audience-based market planning. So instead of saying, this is how I'm going to spend my digital dollars versus this is how I'm going to spend my direct mail dollars or whatever, I like to say, well, wait a minute. This is my sustainer audience. What experience do they need from me this year? They might need some digital, some print, some phone, some personal. But if I'm not thinking about them holistically as an audience, I'm going to have these weird gaps in their experience, and it's going to make retention really complicated, right? So I would say, like, as you're going into it, plan at the audience level. It's very different from how most marketing agencies and most nonprofits do it. But when you do that, it lets you have a really holistic view of what your supporters are going to experience and lets you refine from there. And then I'm also a really big fan of planning out and budgeting my year, but then stopping to make corrections about every 30 days, right? So every 30 days, we sit with results and we say, where should we spend the next dollar? Because 6 months ago, we said we should spend it over here, but is that channel still performing where it should be? Or should I be investing over here or spending more money over there or hiring another person? I mean, all those kind of things, right? And if you're not on an iterative basis doing that sort of course correction, you're going to end up spending money really inefficiently. And then after that, you just have to do it. So you're going to feel unprepared and it's going to be scary. And you're going to say, well, maybe I need more information. I need more assets. I need more this. I need more that. Just do it. Just take the step forward.
Well said. Just take that next step. And, when you're storytelling, I think that there's a lot of different angles you can take in terms of motivators, right? What are you seeing donors are responding to most right now? Are they responding to fear messages, an invite that's just like, hey, here's the impact you can make?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is changing, and it's changing in real time. We do a survey every year of donor audiences, and we ask them a number of different questions. The number one thing that they said, so like 72% of respondents said that what they want most from the charities they support is to understand their vision for change. So I think first and foremost, your storytelling has to be vision forward, right? It can't just be about fear. There are some areas where that works well, right? So like we're in the middle, what are we, a week away from the presidential election right now as we're recording this? Almost everything you're going to see on both sides is about fear, right? In that context, fear will work to some degree. It'll also work to some degree in charities, just like emergencies work, right? The floods in Appalachia over the last, couple of months, emergency messaging works really well for that. If there's an earthquake somewhere, if there's a terrorist attack, like legitimate emergencies, you can raise a lot of money with emergency messaging. But if you do that too many times or in an inauthentic way, people just turn you off, right? So what we're seeing is a really vision forward message of, if you give, here's what we can accomplish together. That kind of messaging, I think, is really playing well right now. We also see, the older the donor audience, the more the messaging needs to be about kind of the traditional approach to, give a dollar to help meet a need, right? Younger audiences aren't about that, right? They're much more likely to say, I want to join the cause. I want to be part of something bigger than me, and I want to accomplish something. It's also what major donors want. So as fewer low dollar donors are continuing to give, and we see younger donors making up a bigger part of donor portfolios and major donors, what they're both going to want is high vision, high impact, long-term solutions, not kicking the can down the road, but really solving the problem. And so if you wrap your messaging around those concepts, I think you'll do really well.
Some of the listeners might be wondering, how much should I ask? How often should I ask? what's your advice on for like consistency or frequency of asking for donations versus just telling the story, right? A lot of people say it's 80-20, we're giving 80%, we're asking 20. What's your theory on that?
Yeah, so you're not going to your listeners aren't going to like my response, which is more than you typically do, right? So this also goes back to demographics and donor behavior. There's a difference. I tell organizations all the time, you have to run a fundraising program for the donors you have today, not the donors you want tomorrow. So we'll talk about younger donors, that donors. If you don't have those donors, you have to align with how the current donors that you have give. And so if they've been trained over 25 years that you're going to ask them 12 times a year, if you take one of those out, you're going to lose money. Now, over time, you can retrain your donor audience. You can give them different experiences and sort of rewire how they give for some of them. Some of them will never change their behavior, right? So we're in this era right now where we're almost like serving two masters, where there's an older audience that still gives the bulk of revenue, but then there's younger, more diverse audiences that haven't caught up financially with the rest of the donor file, but they're also a lot more engaged and they're closer in age to most marketers that serve them. And so serving their needs is different than serving the 72-year-old retiree who's been giving to the charity for 30 years. They need different things. And so for the older audience, you may need to solicit them 10, 12, 20 times a year. For younger audiences and wealthier audiences, it likely is going to be less, but you can't put that strategy on top of the 72-year-old average donor file and expect those donors to change their behavior because you want it, right? So it's this weird era where we have to do a little bit of both, and you really kind of have to test into what frequency is optimal for your audience.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, personalization too, being able to segment those different audiences, speaking to them in unique, personalized ways. They do need different things, which gets me to a practical question for the people wanting to kind of implement this today. A lot of times we need software, right? We can't just segment these audiences using Gmail. What are your organizations using in terms of software and tools to do the segmenting and personalization?
It's all over the map. I mean, we're fairly agnostic on the platforms at our organization. So we work with people who are in Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. We work with people who are in HubSpot, who are in Campaign Monitor, who are in Virtuous. We have some that are in MailChimp. Our preference is always whatever platform can give us the most amount of flexibility and the most amount of personalization and customization without being so expensive and over-engineered that the charity can't use it, right? But at the same time, I really want to avoid getting into a scenario where we're trying to make a meaningful impact and improve performance and we have one segment, right? Because that's not successful for anybody. But, we have dozens of clients and they're on dozens of different platforms.
Yeah, that's what I've seen too. And just learning how to wield those. A lot of them have high capabilities, right? And how are we utilizing that technology? And it's just getting better.
Well, and this is one of my big pet peeves with boards and C-suite leaders. You'll spend 6 figures to onboard a new platform, but then you won't spend $10,000 to send your people to the training to learn how to use it. Let's be real. They're not going to figure it out just by watching YouTube. So if you're going to spend $50, $70, $100,000, spend $110 and get the training so that 2 years from now, you're not sitting here saying, I think we need to change platforms because our people don't know how to use this. That's not the solution.
I love that. It may not be a popular opinion, but it is so needed because so many people don't know how to use the software they have right in front of them, right? So awesome, Andrew. What a great conversation. To wrap it up, what's a question that you don't get asked often, but you wish you were asked when it comes to fundraising?
I wish more CEOs would say, what can I do to help make our fundraising better? Yeah,
that's so well said. It really does take top leadership and vision to make things move, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, we see that the organizations that have the healthiest fundraising are also the organizations where the CEO is most invested in philanthropy.
Wow. That's incredible. Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining. I have just loved this conversation. Is there anything else you want to add for this audience?
I would just encourage, I mean, we're going into the biggest and also the roughest fundraising season of the year. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. Yes, you're going to work your butt off, but you can get through it.
So true. There's so many events coming up, end of year, just so many things. So yeah, well said. Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate you joining Mission Money Fundraising Podcast. Hope to have you back.
Thanks again for having me. I'll come back anytime.
Hey, Mission Money fam, thanks so much for listening. What an incredible conversation. If you're looking to implement some of the things you've learned today and have heard in our conversation and don't know where to start or just want a quick guide, I've made a resource linked below called 5 Quick Wins to Boost Your Fundraising Today. This is just going to be some things that are going to help you boost your digital fundraising that I've learned over the last couple years that I know are going to help you get some quick wins, even within the next week. So go get that resource. It will help you take a next practical step in this fundraising journey. And I'm so excited you are here today and to be learning with you about digital fundraising and how we can continue to further our knowledge in this area and implement it for your unique mission. So thanks for joining, and please come back next week where we're going to even dive a little bit deeper.